Peter, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to our virtual meeting of Brampton's Planning and Development Committee. We will begin the meeting with the City Clerk calling the roll call for attendance at today's meeting.
Members of committee, I will call your name. Please indicate your presence. Councillor Santos.
Present.
Councillor Vasante.
I'm here.
Councillor Willens.
Present.
Councillor Paleshi.
Present.
Councillor Bowman.
Present.
Councillor Williams.
I'm here.
Councillor Fortini.
Over here.
Councillor Singh.
Present.
Councillor Dillon.
I'm here.
And Chair Medeiros.
Here.
All 10 members are present, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Our next item is the approval of the agenda. Does any member wish to add a business item to tonight's meeting? I see none, so I do have a motion moved by Councillor Fortini to approve the agenda, that the agenda for the regular Planning Development Committee meeting of April 12th be approved. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Otherwise, your vote will count in the affirmative. No? Okay. There are no objections, so the motion carries. Meetings of municipal councils are to be open to the public for transparency and accountability, and our meeting will continue to be as well. A few precautions and limitations in person attendance at this meeting is very limited. Members and staff are participating electronically. The public can still access participate in the meeting in a number of ways. Watching this meeting remotely through the city's live stream and playback of the archived video stream, registering with the city clerk's office as a virtual delegate to participate in the meeting, or submitting questions about the agenda, business, and recommendations made by committee today by emailing the city clerk's office at cityclerksoffice@brampton.ca with your question, which will be read into the public meeting record during the 15-minute public question period before the end of the meeting. Also, continue to follow important service and public health updates through the city's website. We move on to our declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Do any members have a declaration of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act for any matter to be considered on today's agenda? I see none. The clerk will so note for the meeting minutes. Consent motion. As part of our new consent motion process, I will read each agenda item that is subject to the consent motion. Any member may verbally identify the item to be held for debate during the meeting. Any item not held for debate will be considered as part of the consent motion and voted on for approval. Any of the following agenda items will not be subject to the consent motion for approval: delegations, presentations, added new business, member discussion items, and public question period. I'll start reading the relevant items, and members can identify any items to be held for debate. Item 7.2, application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw. KLM Planning, Golden Gate Mississauga Road Plaza Limited, Ward 5. Okay, in consent. Item 7.3, application for temporary use zoning bylaw, Blackthorn Development Corporation, south side of Mayfield Road and west of Coleraine Drive, Ward 10. Okay, in consent. Item 11.1, correspondence, Toronto TRCA, update on municipal memorandums of understanding service level agreements. Okay, in consent. Item 11.2, correspondence, Toronto Region Conservation Authority regarding Section 28 mapping. Okay, in consent. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Dillon to approve the consent motion. The following items were considered to be routine and non-controversial by committee and were considered at one time. As per our trial process agreed by council, the consent motion will be subject to a recorded vote. So I'll hand it over to you to City Clerk for the recorded vote.
Members of committee, all in favor of the consent motion with the items noted for approval, please indicate. Councillor Santos.
Yes.
Councillor Vasante. Councillor Vasante? I'll come back to you. Councillor Willens.
In favor.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Willens.
Yes.
Councillor Paleshi.
In favor. Yes.
Councillor Bowman.
Yes.
Councillor Williams. That was a yes. Councillor Fortini. Councillor Fortini?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Singh?
I believe he wrote in the chat box, City Clerk, that he supports it, but he has to re-log in due to some
Okay.
technical
Council-
difficulties.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Singh is in the affirmative. Councillor Dillon?
Yes.
Thank you. And Chair Medeiros?
Yes.
That carries unanimously, 10-0.
Okay, thank you, City Clerk. We now move on to our statutory public meetings reports. This is a public meeting. Our next section of tonight's agenda is the statutory public meeting items. This is a public meeting of the Planning and Development Committee held in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act of Ontario. The proposals to be heard at this public meeting are the result of applications made under the Planning Act. These are not proposals of the City of Brampton unless they are specifically identified as city-initiated proposals. Tonight we have two city-initiated proposals. The intent of this public meeting is to receive submissions from the public regarding these proposals. Given we may have persons watching this meeting through the city's live stream, we will have staff present each proposal subject to a statutory public meeting unless committee decides otherwise. After receiving any pre-registered delegations, members of the committee may ask questions for clarification, but will not engage in debate on the proposal at this time. Committee consideration of the proposal will occur at a future meeting when planning staff bring forward the final recommendation report on each proposal. The city has also posted to its website supporting information and documentation for these development applications for public review and reference. We will now proceed to consider the 4 items on this evening's statutory public meeting agenda. And after consideration of these public meeting items, committee will deal with the balance of the agenda items on today's agenda. So our first one is item 5.1. City Initiated Official Plan Amendment, Toronto Gore Density Policy Review Study, Ward 10. And I believe I will hand it over to Michelle Gervais from our Policy Planning and Building and Economic Development team. So over to you, Michelle. Thank you.
And members of committee, just a moment as I just give the presenter role over to planning staff to bring up the presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, committee members, staff, and members of the public. My name is Michelle Gervais, and I am the policy planner responsible for managing the city-initiated official plan amendment. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide information to the public and to seek feedback on the city-initiated official plan amendment that implements the Toronto Gore Density Policy Review Study recommendations. No decision will be made this evening. I would like to introduce David Riley from SGL Planning and Design Inc., who has been retained by the city to undertake the Toronto Gore Density Policy Review Study. David is here to assist in answering any questions related to the Phase 1, 2, and 3 report that he has prepared. Next slide, please. The boundaries of the study consist of Countryside Drive to the north, Castlemore Road to the south, the Gore Road to the east, Goreway Drive to the west, along with 2 areas north of Countryside Drive. The Toronto Gore community comprises of 2 separate and distinct components. The first component is the established estate residential area, consisting of the existing public streets, houses, parks, and open space in the community. And the second component is the undeveloped lands, generally located in the southern quadrant of the Toronto Gore between McBean Drive and the Gore Road, north of Castlemore Road. Next slide, please. In terms of processing to date, the study commenced in 2016 and the city had retained SGL Planning and Design Inc. to complete the study. To date, 2 open house meetings have been held, one in March 2019, and an online presentation was available for the public to view and provide comments on between July and August of 2020. Notice of the public meeting was provided by way of a mail out to all owners within 240 meters of the boundaries of the undeveloped lands, and an advertisement in the Brampton Guardian was printed on March 18th, 2021. In addition, all individuals who have attended the 2 open houses and those who have requested to be informed of the study were notified of the public meeting. Next slide, please. The Toronto Gore Density Policy Review Study includes two parts. The first part is to assess the existing established estate residential area with a focus on protecting community character and determine whether any amendments are required to the city's official plan policies to protect this character. The second part is to examine the feasibility of permitting urban densities on full municipal services on the undeveloped lands located in the southern quadrant of Toronto Gore. The study undertaken by SGL Planning includes a supply and demand analysis of estate residential housing, as well as a high-level review of the transportation, servicing, and open space needs to support urban densities. Based on this analysis, policy recommendations for the undeveloped lands have been prepared. Next slide, please. Since the study commenced in 2016, a recommendation report was prepared by policy planning staff and was approved by Planning and Development Committee in January of 2019. The purpose of this report was to present the Phase 1 and 2 report prepared by SGL Planning, and this included a policy overview, a summary of the analysis that has been completed to date, and it also included preliminary policy options. This report that was approved by Planning Committee in January of 2019 also provided and direction for staff to undertake public consultation to present the preliminary findings and options of the study. Next slide, please. Members of the public have had an opportunity to participate and provide comments through the duration of the study. First public open house meeting was held in March 2019 to introduce the study, to discuss the findings from the background research and analysis completed by SGL, and to receive feedback from residents on what elements and qualities they felt were important and contribute to the character of their neighborhood. Based on the public feedback received at the first open house meeting and the provincial policy directives that were released after the first open house meeting, proposed policy recommendations were amended and presented online for the public to view and provide comments on between July and August of 2020. Next slide, please. As mentioned previously, the study includes a review of both the established estate residential area and the undeveloped lands in Toronto Gore. What is being presented at the statutory public to meeting night are only the proposed policy recommendations for the undeveloped lands in the southern quadrant of Toronto Gore, and this area is shown as blue on the screen. Additional analysis and public consultation is required prior to advancing any policy recommendations with respect to the established estate residential area. And this is the larger area shown in yellow. Next slide, please. I will provide a brief policy overview as it relates to the undeveloped lands. Provincial policy direction provided in both the provincial policy statement and the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe promotes compact green development, requires a mix of uses and dwelling types, promotes efficient use of land and infrastructure, and directs growth to settlement areas. In the Region Appeals official plan, the undeveloped lands are located within the urban system and are also located within the designated greenfield area. The urban system policies in the region's official plan promotes compact built form and a mix of land uses that efficiently uses land, services, and infrastructure while taking into account the characteristics of existing communities and services. The City of Brampton's official plan designates the undeveloped lands as estate residential, and they're also located within the city's designated greenfield area. New communities within the designated greenfield area are to contribute to the creation of complete communities by providing a diverse mix of land uses. Next slide, please. So the key findings of SGL's analysis are that estate residential housing will have a limited role in fulfilling future housing demand in Brampton, and that any demand for estate residential housing can be accommodated within the existing supply of estate residential housing and the vacant estate lots in Brampton. Therefore, it is recommended that the undeveloped portion of Toronto Gore be redesignated from estate residential to residential in the official plan to permit a full range of housing types on lots that are less than 2 acres in size. Prior to any development occurring on the undeveloped lands, a secondary plan shall be prepared to establish the goals and objectives for this new community. The secondary plan will formulate land use policies pertaining to density, built form, appropriate transition between the established estate residential community and the undeveloped lands. It will look at road and access, pedestrian connections, open space, the natural heritage system, and servicing. Next slide, please. So to implement the study recommendations of permitting urban densities on the undeveloped lands, amendments to Brampton's official plan are being proposed. The first amendment is to change the designation from estate residential to residential. The open space designations will remain, and the residential and special land use policy areas that currently apply in the undeveloped lands will also remain. Next slide, please. The second amendment is to remove the unique communities designation on Schedule 1 of the City of Brampton's official plan. Again, the underlining designations of communities and open space would remain. Next slide, please. The third amendment is to amend Schedule G, secondary plan areas, by removing the undeveloped lands from the Toronto Gore Real Estate Secondary Plan Area 26 and adding a new secondary plan for the undeveloped lands known as the Gore Meadows Secondary Plan Area 56. Next slide, please. The fourth amendment is to add a policy to the residential section of the official plan that will guide the preparation of the future secondary plan for the undeveloped lands. This policy will include the following: to provide a gradual and sensitive transition in density between the adjacent established estate residential area and the future secondary plan area, to provide a diverse range and mix of housing options, including affordable housing, that no vehicular connections between the adjacent established estate residential area and the future secondary plan area shall be provided, that the extension of Reichland Lane shall be prohibited, that vehicular access to and from the future secondary plan area will be from McBean Drive and the Gore Road, that development within the secondary plan area shall be on full urban municipal services, that the existing natural heritage system shall be protected and enhanced, and that pedestrian and cyclist linkages between the natural heritage system and Gore Meadows Community Center shall be provided where it has been demonstrated that the functions of the natural heritage system will not be adversely impacted. Next slide, please. With respect to next steps, I will review and assess any comments received from the public and any comments from internal division and external agencies. I will prepare a final recommendation report and official plan amendment to council that will address conformity with provincial policies and address any comments received from members of the public. I will contact and follow up with those residents who have spoken, written in, or advised in an interest of the city-initiated official plan amendment to let them know when the final recommendation report and official plan amendment will be forwarded to Planning Committee and Council for their consideration. Next slide, please. The report associated with tonight's meeting is available online. The presentation will be available online shortly. My name and my contact information is posted on the screen. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. To the City Clerk, do we have any registered delegates for comments today?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did have a delegation registered, Deiramud Horgan from CanDevCon, but I understand he has withdrawn the delegation request. He is in the session, so I just wish to confirm. Deiramud Horgan, your microphone is unmuted. Can you please confirm if you still wish to delegate or not?
Make a delegation, thank you.
Sorry, I just caught the end of that. There no delegation, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Chair, there are no delegations. We only have the added correspondence 11.4 from Macaulay, Shiomi, Housen, and that was distributed by email to members of committee about an hour before the start of the committee tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, City Clerk. So members of committee, do you have any questions or comments or questions of clarification? No. Okay. Then I do have a motion moved by Councillor Singh to approve the staff report recommendations and applicant or move the staff recommendations and receive the correspondence that the report titled Information Report City Initiated Official Plan Amendment Toronto Gore Density Policy Review Ward 10 to the Planning Development Committee meeting of April 12th, be received, that the Planning, Building, and Economic Development Department staff be directed to report back to Planning and Development Committee with the results of the public meeting and final recommendations, and that a copy of this report and council resolution be forwarded to the Region Appeal for information. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Okay, to me, there are no objections, so the motion carries. Statutory public meeting for this item is now adjourned. We now move on to our next city-initiated proposal, and that is a plan to amend item 5.2 to implement the new airport intermodal secondary plan area 4. And I believe I will hand it over now to Claudia Larota from our Policy and Planning, Building, Economic Development Committee for staff recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members of committee and members of the public. My name is Claudia Larota, and I am the policy planner responsible for managing the secondary plan review, and specifically this city-initiated official plan amendment to implement the new airport intermodal secondary plan area 4. The purpose of this public meeting is to provide information to the public and seek feedback on the proposed official plan amendment. No decision will be made this evening. Next slide, please. The proposed new secondary plan is generally located between Torbram Road and Finch Avenue on Humber West Parkway and south of Bovair Drive up to the city limits to the south. This secondary plan will cover the largest employment area of the city. Next slide, please. In terms of some background information on this project, Policy Planning initiated a review of the city's older secondary plans back in 2015, with the intention of reducing the number of secondary plans and updating their policies and schedules, in particular for those secondary plans that still refer back to the 76 and 84 official plans. Those policies that were no longer needed or relevant were deleted, and to avoid duplication, the policies that are already existing in the 2006 official plan, such as all the transportation, environmental, and urban design, were also deleted. In that way, we rely more on the official plan for those general policies. As part of this first phase of the review, 18 of the former secondary plans were consolidated into 5 new larger areas, and those new secondary plans were adopted by Council in September of 2018. Next slide, please. On this Schedule G of the official plan, the secondary plan schedules, you can see the reduction in the number of secondary plans from early 2018, when we had over 50 secondary plans prior to the consolidation of those 18 plans. And on the right, it shows the current Schedule G, which will now be even further reduced with the proposed consolidation of this new airport intermodal secondary plan. Next slide, please. The Airport Intermodal Secondary Plan Area 4 proposes to consolidate 6 of the existing secondary plans, areas 13, 14, 22, 23, 32, and 37, and a small portion of the newly adopted SB 5, just west of Torbram Road, north of the 407, as you can see on the slide. And this will create one secondary plan that will apply to the largest employment area of the city. Next slide, please. In terms of the process to date, as I pointed at the beginning, the review of the secondary plans was initiated in 2015, which followed with the adoption of 5 of the new secondary plans in September of 2018 as part of the first phase of the secondary plan review. The notice of the public meeting for tonight's item was posted on the Brampton Guardian and the city's website on March 18, 2021. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, one of the objectives of the secondary plan review is to update the schedules that we currently have for some of these older secondary plans. These schedules were created in CAD format more than 20 years ago, and they're very cumbersome to update and make any changes. Some of these schedules don't really reflect the actual layout of the roads or property boundaries, making it difficult sometimes to determine the actual designation of a specific property. Next slide, please. So through this process, we are creating a schedule that is easier to read and interpret, that is user-friendly as it reflects current property boundaries. That way, staff and the public are able to determine the exact designation that applies to a specific property. With the consolidation of these new 6 secondary plans, we are proposing to combine the designations that currently apply to each of them into one. And although the secondary plan review is not intended to significantly alter existing development rights or change existing designations, combining those designations into one may result in some minor additional permissions for some properties. In addition, we're also trying to eliminate special policy areas as much as possible. So we are only maintaining those special policy areas that have very unique permissions that would not be recognized by a parent land use designation. That would be the case, for example, for special policy areas that permits a very specific use, or where there are restrictions in terms of gross floor area, locations of buildings, etc. All other special policy areas are proposed to be replaced with a general designation, if that designation recognizes all the current existing permissions. It is important to note that this exercise is also not intended to identify new areas for intensification. That is something that will be addressed as part of the official plan review. And through that process, we will identify the need to further update any of the existing secondary plans. Next slide, please. The proposed new secondary plan is consistent with provincial policies, including the Planning Act, the Provincial Policy Statement, and the Growth Plan, and conforms to the cities and regions' official plan. Next slide. Following the public meeting today, the draft amendment will be circulated to internal departments and external agencies for review and comments. Once we receive all these comments from the circulation of this draft official plan amendment, we will proceed with a recommendation report, likely in the fall, and council's adoption of the new airport intermodal secondary plan, which will be followed by a 20-day appeal period. With the adoption of this secondary plan, we will finalize the first phase of the secondary plan review, and we will continue with the review of other secondary plans as part of phase 2, like the review of Ram East and Gorway Drive secondary plans, which was initiated earlier this year. Next slide, please. The staff report associated with tonight's meeting and this presentation are available online on the meetings and agendas page. You can also find more information on the secondary plan review process on the website brampton.ca/secondary plan review. Again, my name is Claudia Lorota and my contact information is provided on the screen. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. To the city clerk, do we have any registered delegations?
Mr. Chair, we have no delegations and no correspondence on this item.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee, are there any questions of clarification? I see none, so I do have a motion moved by Councillor Dillon to approve the staff report recommendations titled, that the report titled to the Planning and Development Committee meeting of April 12th be received, and that Planning, Building and Economic Development Department staff be directed to report back to Planning and Development Services Committee with the results of the public meeting and the staff recommendation. Is there anyone opposed to the motion? Okay, this item is now adjourned. We go now to item 5.3, application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw, and I believe Ward 6, and I will believe I hand it over to Yin Chow for our planning, building, and economic development. Welcome, Yin.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and the public. My name is Yin Xiao, and I am the planner assigned to process and review the application to amend the official plan and the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. The subject site is located at the northeast corner of Mississauga Road and Sandalwood Parkway. Next, please. This is an aerial photo showing the surrounding context. Directly north to the site is the Peel Region Police Association. East of the site is the existing medium and high density residential development. South of the site is an existing commercial plaza. West of the site across from Mississauga Road are agricultural lands which are part of the Heritage Heights secondary plan area. The subject site is also located approximately 2.5 kilometers from the Mount Pleasant GO station. Next, please. This slide shows the concept plan of the proposed development. A portion of the site has been developed with a gas station, which will remain. The proposed development consists of 3 high-rise buildings shown on the south side of the site, including Tower A, having 28 stories, Tower B, 26 stories, and Tower C, 16 stories. Tower A and Tower B are connected by a 4-story podium, including 748 square meters of commercial space on the ground floor. Shown on the north end of the site are 3 stacked townhouse blocks. The total amount of residential units being proposed are 1,004 condominium units in the 3 high-rise buildings and 75 stacked townhouse units. A total of 1,214 parking spaces are proposed, including 162 visitor parking spaces. The proposed development achieves a density of 635 units per net hectare and a floor space ratio of 4.5. Next, please. The following slides will show some renderings and perspectives of the development. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next, please. So the application will be evaluated against the existing provincial and municipal policies. Next, please. The lands are designated residential and identified as greenfield area and convenience retail in the official plan. The applicant is proposing to delete the convenience retail designation on the site. Next, please. The site is designated convenience commercial, motor vehicle commercial, and mixed use area 1 in the Mount Pleasant secondary plan. Applicant is proposing to redesignate the site to a high density and a medium density residential and relocate the motor vehicle commercial designation from the southeast corner of the site to the existing gas station land. Next, please. The block plan designation for the site is motor vehicle commercial and convenience commercial. Amendment to the block plan is being proposed to redesignate the site to medium and high density residential and relocate the motor vehicle commercial designation to the existing gas station land. Next slide, please. The site is intended for a commercial development on the concept plan as part of the secondary plan schedule. Next, please. This slide shows the existing zoning on the subject site. The existing gas station is zoned Highway Commercial 1, and the rest of the site is zoned Commercial 3. The applicant proposes to keep the zoning for the gas station lands and redesignate the rest of the site to a residential apartment zone. Next, please. The application is currently under review, and several technical considerations have been identified. Height and density. Staff will evaluate the proposed increasing density in the context of the existing city structure and the current policy framework. In particular, the site is close to lands forming part of the Heritage Heights secondary plan. When reviewing the appropriateness of the height and density of the proposal, staff will have regard to the emerging policy framework for the Heritage Heights secondary plan. Build form. Staff are evaluating the proposed build form, including height, scale, and massing, in accordance with the development design guidelines. In particular, as it relates to the impact on the surrounding and future developments to the north. Parking. Staff are evaluating the appropriateness of the proposed reduced parking ratio and the lay-by vehicle parking spaces on the Sandalwood Parkway. Commercial space. The site was intended for a commercial development in the official plan and secondary plan. Staff are evaluating whether the amount of commercial space proposed is sufficient to meet the intent of these plans to ensure local demand for retail goods and services can be accommodated. Next slide, please. The application was deemed complete on February 9th, 2021, and the notice of public meeting was circulated to property owners within 240 meters of the subject site on March 15th. Staff will continue to review the application, including reviewing the comments from the public. Staff will at a later time advance a final recommendation report to Council for a decision. Issues that have been raised will be addressed in the recommendation report. Staff will contact and follow up with those residents who have provided comments through our channels. Next, please. The report and submitted materials associated with tonight's meeting is available online, and the presentation will be available online shortly. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact myself, my manager, or the applicant. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the city clerk. I do have here one person registered. Are there any further, city clerk?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, there is only the one delegate, Sonia Sharma, and there is the one piece of correspondence identified as 11.3 on the agenda.
Okay, so I'll hand it over to you for the delegation.
Sonia, you are in the session right now, so you can unmute your mic, and you have 5 minutes to address the committee on this item.
Thank you, everyone. So I just wanted to present a couple of things that I've had the opportunity to speak with the residing neighbors on in our subdivision, and a couple of key points of concern that have come up as a result of this. Obviously, height and density. I mean, we're really concerned about the density and the height. I mean, having 28 stories so close to houses that have backyards that are going to be open, it's pretty much going to be an invasion of privacy into people's backyards. So, I mean, they're going to have the height advantage to be able to look down upon existing residentials that are houses, townhouses, semis, and be able to view into their backyards and you know, look into their private lives. So it makes us feel like we're going to have our windows that, you know, you so much love having that bright sunlight coming in, have our windows closed all the time just so that we can be be private in our own homes. Another point that we would like to raise is we don't want the downtown feel where, you know, you have these high-rise buildings so close to houses. You know, there's a reason why we like to come out to the rural neighborhoods in Brampton to be able to raise our families and not have to live in the overpopulated areas of downtown Toronto. I mean, if that was the case, we'd all be downtown with high-rise condominium buildings everywhere. 28 stories is very high. Builders are telling people that are buying houses in the area that there won't be any tall buildings. So now who's right and who's wrong? I mean, builders are now misinforming people that are looking at getting new houses that are still being built, and they bought it based off of the fact that there wouldn't be any tall buildings in the subdivision. The next point that I'd like to bring up is our GO train. It's already congested, and for those of us that work downtown, we have a hard time battling in the morning to get there, to get parking, to be able to park and not get ticketed because there's no parking. With the addition of 3 buildings plus townhomes, a lot more people that eventually will be commuting downtown. Could be students, could be workers, and with parking already being an issue, how does that impact us when we want to look at future commuting downtown? You want to live in a rural neighborhood and still have your jobs. Houses in the neighborhood, they're already so close together. I mean, you've got the most minimum amount of spaces in between houses, and now you're putting in more people on top of that. So the claustrophobicness and the congestion is just going to be out the door. Also, how is this going to affect the future of the PRPA? Is this going to lead to the PRPA now being pushed out? I mean, 3 condo buildings for now, but then eventually they're going to be looking at the PRPA land and saying, well, why don't we take that over? You know, that it's an ongoing cycle. One of the key concerns is also lack of green space. Where is it going? More buildings means lack of green space. So we have all these children, we want them to play, have all these opportunities, and we just have the one community park that, you know, it's already getting crowded. So how are people supposed to go and enjoy some green space with their families? And not to mention, with these buildings being put in, that parking is going to overflow into residential neighborhood streets. So if someone doesn't want to park underground in the building, or the parking is full, that means that now these people are going to be parking on our residential streets and taking up our areas. More buildings means more school-age children. So does that mean more portables, which are already unhealthy? I have seen schools being created and the portables are put in place before the children are even in the school. So how many more children does that mean are going to be put into a portable? Being a parent myself, I don't want my child to be crammed into a school that has 30 plus kids per class and they're being put into a portable from day one. It's a growing concern when it comes to the education of our children. Overall, I think I just want to say the area of Mount Pleasant is not happy that these buildings are being created. We want to live and have the rural community vibe, not the urban feel of downtown Toronto or downtown Mississauga. If that was the case, we'd be living right across from Square One. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Thank you very much, members of committee. Are there any questions for the delegation? Okay, no, thank you very much. Are there any questions regarding the presentation to staff for clarification? No, okay, so I do have a motion moved by Councillor Palucci. If we put the motion on the board, that the report titled application to amend the official plan zoning bylaw of Fremont Properties Incorporated to the Planning Development Committee meeting of April 12th be received, and that development staff be directed to report back to the Planning Development Committee with the results of the public meeting and the staff recommendations subsequent to the completion of the circulation of the application and a comprehensive evaluation of the proposal, and that correspondence item 11.3 be received. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? No, the statutory public meeting for this item is now adjourned. We now move on to item 5.4, application to amend the zoning bylaw, Humphreys Planning Group Incorporated, Ward 9, and I will hand it over to, Dana Jenkins. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of committee, staff, and members of the public. My name is Dana Jenkins, and I'm the planner assigned to process the application. The purpose of the meeting is to get public input on the proposal filed by Humphreys Planning Group on behalf of 1968 610 Ontario Limited. Next slide, please. The sub-property is located within Ward 9 in the north central part of the city, generally east of Highway 410 and south of Mayfield Road. Next slide, please. The property, which is outlined here in blue in the illustration on the left, is approximately 2.95 hectares or 7.29 acres in size and is currently vacant. There are residential lands on the east side of the Dixie Road with employment uses planned to the north, west, and south. Slide, please. The applicant proposes an amendment to the zoning bylaw to permit a one-story multi-unit industrial building featuring one building of approximately 15,097 square meters or 162,503 square feet, accessory office space along the Dixie Road and Inspire Boulevard frontages, a total of 169 parking spaces, including 6 accessible, accessible spaces, 22 loading dock doors, 2 drive-in doors, and 4 loading spaces. Next slide, please. This slide shows the area of notification for property owners within a 240-meter limit of the subject property. were sent notice of the application by direct mail. Signs have also been posted on the property, and notice has been published in the Brampton Guardian newspaper and on the city's website. Next slide, please. The subject property is designated industrial in the official plan. The proposal does not require amendment of the official plan. Next slide, please. Property is located within the Countryside Villages Secondary Plan, Area 48, where the site is designated Prestige Industrial and Special Policy Area 5, intended for higher order employment uses. Slide, please. The current zoning of the lands is Service Commercial, Special Section 2956. The zone permits uses including motor vehicle sales, leasing, and rental establishment, motor vehicle repair, outside storage for display of vehicles, drive-through facilities, banks, and takeout restaurants. Next slide, please. The applicant proposes the following amendments to the zoning bylaw. To rezone the lands from the current Service Commercial 2956 zone to Industrial 1, M1, with a special section yet to be assigned. Permitted uses to include manufacturing, packaging, processing, repair, and assembly of goods within an enclosed building. To permit a rear yard setback of 4.0 meters. To permit an exterior side yard setback of 9.0 meters. Slide, please. Issues identified to date include the following. Potential impact on residential neighborhoods to the east and using design to address land use compatibility, and how to best integrate the development with the transportation network and ensure that all modes, walking, cycling, driving, and transit, are accommodated. Please. The application will be evaluated against existing provincial and municipal policies, including those found in the Planning Act, the Provincial Policy Statement, the Growth Plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, Region Appeal Official Plan, the City of Brampton Official Plan, and the Countryside Villages Secondary Plan. Slide, please. This slide gives an overview of where we are in the processing of the application. Notice of a complete application was issued on February 4th, 2021. The application was circulated and the public meeting notice was issued on March 12th for this evening's April 12th meeting. Going forward, staff will collect all public feedback and technical and other review comments from agencies and departments and prepare a recommendation report for decision by council, after which time there will be an appeal period for that decision. Slide, please. This final slide shows that the information report, as well as this evening's presentation, can be found on the city's website at www.brampton.ca on the meetings and agenda page. Contact information for me, the staff planner for the city, is noted here, along with contact information for Ms. Rosemary Humphreys, the owner's agent from Humphreys Planning Group, Inc. This concludes my presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. City Clerk, do we have any delegations?
Mr. Chair, we do. We have the applicant who has a presentation to provide to committee. And we'll just bring that up momentarily. And Rosemary, you are in the session. You can unmute your mic to address the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Fay. Good evening, it's Rosemary Humphreys from the Humphreys Planning Group. I do have a presentation. I believe it has been circulated. It did form part of the agenda this evening. It is somewhat repetitive from what Ms. Jenkins had already provided to you, and I didn't necessarily intend on going through it in its entirety. But a couple of things I would like to point out to you. If you could turn to slide 3 for me, please. Oops, I think we missed one. One back. There we go. I just wanted to point out to you, this is a copy of the actual site plan. We are in the process of getting our site plan application submission together. We'll be submitting it very shortly to the city, and we have been working very closely with planning, urban design staff at the city as it relates to the design, the materiality, and the colors of the building. There are two variances that we do need as it relates to our zoning application, and they are shown in blue. One is the side yard setback from Dixie Road, which is 9 meters, and the other one is the rear yard setback, which you see at the top of your page for the rear yard setback of the building. Those setbacks reductions are being requested to allow us to move the building closer to the street and to create a more pedestrian human scale of the building through our landscape design and the architecture, as well as to wrap the building around 3 sides of the property to create a nicer feel to the building itself. Next slide, please. Oops. That's the other, the next slide, please. Thank you. So this slide here, you probably saw as part of Mrs. Jenkins' application. This gives you a view of what you would see as you were driving along Dixie Road. So you would see very nice corner treatments with a lot of glazing at the corners of the building. And on the bottom slide here, you would see this is the elevation facing west, which is adjacent to another side yard of adjacent lands. So it'd be an internal side yard. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is what you would see at the north end of the building. What we wanted to show you is the top slide and the center slide effectively are the same elevation, but what you see is the loading docks at the along the northern edge of the building, and then what we have proposed is an acoustical wall or treatment along the property line, which will effectively screen the loading bays from public view and address any issues as it may relate to noise for the existing low-rise residential community that's located to the east side of Dixie Road. Next slide, please. These are just some additional renderings that we had prepared so you can see how all corner treatments of the building have been upgraded to provide a good interface with the streets, with the existing streets and adjacent properties. I think I'll stop my presentation there. And if members of council or committee have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As I see, there's no further delegations. Members of committee, do you have any questions for the delegation? No. Okay. So I do have a motion moved by Councillor Dillon that the report titled Information Report Application to amend the zoning bylaw, Humphreys Planning Group Incorporated, northwest corner of Fire Boulevard and Dixie Road, Ward 9, to the Planning Development Committee of April 12th be received, and that the Planning Development Service staff be directed to report back to the Planning Development Committee with the results of the public meeting and the staff recommendation subsequent to the completion of the circulation of the application of comprehensive evaluation of the proposal, and that delegation 6.3 be received. Is there anyone opposed? Note there are no objections, so the motion carries. Statutory public meeting for this item is now adjourned. We now move on to public delegations. Item 6.1 to the city clerk.
Mr. Chair, we have no delegations on this item.
Okay, so I do believe then, so there's no delegation, so we'll move on to the next item and deal with the staff report 7.1 in agenda order. Do any members have any questions regarding the staff report? No? Okay, I have a motion moved by Councillor Singh to approve the staff report, that the report titled Site-Specific Amendment to Sign Bylaw 399-2002 William Osler Health System Brampton Civic Hospital, 2100 Blueberry Drive East, 2100 Blueberry Drive East, Ward 9, to the Planning Development Committee, meeting of April 12th, be received and that a bylaw be passed to amend signed bylaw 399 as amended to permit the proposed site-specific amendment. Is there anyone opposed to this motion? Okay, the motion, there are no objections, so the motion carries. Now we move on to, I think there's no further delegations. We've dealt with the delegations, we've dealt with the reports.
Mr. Chair, the next
so-
item would be section 12,
Right.
councillor question period.
Yes, councillor question period. Are there any members have any questions regarding today's planning committee meeting? No. And to the city clerk, do we have any public question period? Any public questions from members of the public?
There are none, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So I guess our next item of business is adjournment. So our next scheduled meeting is April 26th at 1 p.m. I do have a motion moved by Councillor Vicente to adjourn tonight's meeting, that the Planning Development Committee do now adjourn to meet again on Monday, April 26, 2021 at 1 p.m. or at the call of the chair. Does anyone oppose? No, the meeting is now adjourned. Stay home, stay safe, and stay healthy. Practice social distancing and wear a face covering. Thank you very much, and thank you to staff. Have everyone a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, we're just going to wait